Title: The Spark Beneath the Joke. Year: 162,500,000 Era. Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the City of Quib. Nothing was serious, not even tragedy. Built on a foundation of volcanic ash and forgotten punchlines, Quib prided itself on its resilience through comedy. Grief was processed by roast battles, arguments were solved with dance-offs, and the city's highest court was a giant spinning wheel of sarcasm known as the Bench of Banter. But beneath the laughter something simmered. The Keeper of Ashes knew it well. He was the city's unofficial grief collector, tending to the sacred fire garden, where every unspoken sorrow was burned into ritual flame. He visited, most preferred to joke it off, until the archivist of regret came along. She arrived with a trunk full of one-liners and a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. She claimed to be collecting comedic failures from a museum of almost funny, but in truth, she was looking for a spark not of humor, but of healing. The light you seek, the Keeper warned, must first ignite inside. She laughed. Then hand me a match, or at least a bad pun. And so began the unlikeliest alliance Quib had seen. Chapter 2. They traveled the city with a mobile cart called the Grievance Giggle Booth. Citizens were invited to tell their saddest story as a joke. It worked, oddly. A man joked about losing his dog to a sky whale, while a woman made puns out of heartbreak. A child turned exile into an improv sketch. Each tale, once shared, was burned in the Keeper's garden with solemn laughter. The archivist recorded them all, not for irony, for memory. Soon, people stopped laughing at pain and started laughing through it. Quib changed. A new council was proposed, the assembly of sincere absurdity. Legislation was drafted with footnotes in limerick form. Therapy sessions began with stand-up warm-ups. But then came the dry spell, a month without laughter. Chapter 3. The volcano that powered the city's humor core. Yes, that was a thing had cooled. Not geologically, emotionally. People were tired, too tired to laugh, too raw. The Keeper of Ashes stood in the plaza and simply said, "It's okay not to joke right now." And that broke the spell. The archivist set fire to her own trunk of regrets. This was never a museum, she said. It was a mirror. That night, the fire garden roared brighter than ever. Citizens gathered without gimmicks. They cried. They hungered. And then someone whispered a pun. It wasn't funny, but it was honest. The light you seek must first ignite inside. And in Quib it did. Now, the city honors both sides of the laugh. And on the wall beside the Bench of Banter, newly engraved, the light you seek must first ignite inside. And if it flickers, lit it. Even ashes can catch fire again. Title: The Oath That Broke and Bound. Year: 162,179,486.7. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the sun-chiseled frontier of Daskar Hollow, the age of iron oaths had ended, or so they said. People lived by silence and hard work, shaped by seasons more than sermons. The village's only tradition still observed was the trial of binding, a ritual where youth pledged their lifelong role in society. The one-eyed truth was different. She arrived the night of the trial, wrapped in road dust, her left eye gleaming void of sapphire vase. She spoke little, but her presence stirred rumors. Some said she was a fallen lawkeeper. Others claimed she had once broken the binding oath and lived. The youth of the hollow gathered. Among them Kelm, a quiet, sharp-eyed boy who was bond with his older sister. Val was stronger than any spoken promise. Val was set to leave for the inner trade. Kelm was to become a silent grafter. He didn't want either, but to defy the binding was to risk exile. The one-eyed truth approached him the evening and whispered, "Some bonds speak not in words, but in shared silences that echo forever." And in that silence, a choice began to form. Chapter 2. Elm broke the trial. Instead of reciting the binding oath, he stepped forward and asked the elders one question. "What if I need to change?" Gasps followed, then silence. The one-eyed truth said nothing, but her presence was a shield around him. Belle stepped beside her brother. "Then I'll stay until he knows." The council deliberated. Change was dangerous. Chaos. Rebellion. But the truth was, many had long yearned for a different path. One by one, others stood. A girl destined for the forge asked to study stars. A boy assigned to animal care revealed his dream to paint winds. The one-eyed truth turned to the elders. "I was once bound, and I saved no one until I broke it." The name she carried was earned through betrayal, but her title, the Oathbreaker, turned. Savior came from what followed. An entire city spared because she chose conscience over code. Chapter 3. The trial of binding was suspended. In its place, the echo rite was born, a yearly moment not to declare a fate, but to revisit one's choices and ask, "Is this still who I am?" Helm grew into a silent scrafter after all but one who told stories through pause and glance, not rules. Phil became the first hollow envoy to the inner trade under the condition she could return at will. The one-eyed truth remained a mystery, until one day her sapphire eye cracked, not from damage, from peace. Her work was done. She vanished as she came in silence, but her message remained, etched in the new stone arch at the hollow's center. Some bonds speak not in words, but in shared silences that echo forever. Break what binds, keep what frees, and let change carve the way forward. Title: The Path That Hungers. Here. Era. Early Awakening. Author Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the deep forests of the Western Rim, a path once threaded through the grove of forgotten tongues and ancient woodland, said to speak in the dreams of those who listened. That path was lost generations ago, swallowed by war, silence, and roots that no longer remembered kindness. But hunger always finds a way. The stranger with your eyes walked alone, though his name was spoken in the low hum of twilight. He bore a blade made of star, iron, and a book with no title. Where others saw danger, he saw questions, and this time the question was, where does knowledge go when the world forgets? He followed faint whispers through moss-covered stones, between birds and cliffs that glowed only when ignored. At his side, a companion emerged, a girl from the valley called Lyra, known among her people as the hunger that wakes. She burned with unspoken questions, and followed him not for answers, but for the way he taught her to shape better questions. When the road disappears, he told her, your feet remember how to make one. Chapter 2. Together they unearthed the path of voices, an old trail hidden beneath stories. Every step lit a spark of memory. They found abandoned shrines, shattered scrolls, and books sewn into trees. Each relic whispered a piece of language long lost, truths too inconvenient, or wisdom being dangerous by those who preferred control. The grove tested them. Twisting vines mimicked familiar shapes. Mirages of regret clouded their sleep, and the forest demanded answers in riddles only silence would solve. Lyra grew. She no longer followed, she challenged. And when a forgotten guardian rose from roots and shadow, it did not strike them down. It asked, why do you disturb what has rested? Lyra stepped forward, because rest without remembrance becomes rot. And we have come to learn. The guardian bowed, and opened the gate of echoes. Chapter 3. Beyond the gate, they found the archive, a living library, built not with stone, but with breath and memory. It pulsed with every question left unanswered in the world beyond. Scholars came, summoned by instinct. Wanderers found direction in its whispers. The stranger with your eyes handed Lyra the book with no title. It's yours now. She opened it, and found it empty. But as she walked, it filled with maps she sketched from memory, with the stories of those they met, with questions she dared to ask, and the moments where she didn't need answers. The archive grew, not just in walls, but in voices. And when the grove sang once more, its roots curled gently around paths formed not of brick, but of belief. At the heart of the library, carved into the bark of a tree older than time, one phrase remains. When the road disappears, your feet remember how to make one, and the hunger for truth feeds the world back into bloom. Title: The Fabric Between. Year: 161,538,461.1. Era: Early Awakening. Author Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shattered valley of Eldrin's Fold, the ruins of the old empire slept beneath wildflowers and whispering winds. Those who dared to dwell there claimed it was haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories that rewrote themselves in dreams. The archivist of regret came to Eldrin in search of a name she had forgotten her own. With only fragments of a burned journal and the silent guidance of a spectral companion known as the Ghost General, she wandered the ruins, documenting echoes of decisions long made and the pain that rippled outward from each. She never spoke of her past. The villagers only knew that she listened deeply and wept for strangers. She taught them one lesson. Destiny is sculpted not by decisions alone, but by the courage to live through them. And they began to believe her, until the council sent soldiers to claim the ruins and drive the villagers away. Chapter 2. The soldiers came with torches and proclamations. This place is Empire land. You are trespassers. The villagers ready to flee, but the archivist did not move. She walked into the square and laid her journal at the feet of the commander. In it, memories, some hers, some borrowed, showed choices made by the very ancestors of the Empire. Choices that led to famine, to war, to grief, and choices that saved lives through mercy. You do not inherit power, she told them. You inherit responsibility. The Ghost General appeared beside her, then not to fight, but to speak. He had once led the Empire's final campaign, and he had surrendered when he saw the cost. His voice shook the air. I fought for borders. She fights for bonds. Moved, one of the soldiers lowered his torch, then another, and Eldrin's Fold stood firm. Chapter 3. The ruins were transformed not into monuments, but into schools, gardens, and memory halls. Each villager contributed something: a story, a song, a stone carved with names. The soldiers who stayed became builders. The ones who left carried tales of a place where past pain seeded present purpose. The artist continued her work, but no longer alone. She created the living map, a woven mural connecting every choice made in Eldrin to the people it affected, forming a tapestry of consequence and courage. And when she finally found her name, she whispered it only to the wind. But the ghost general heard. He bowed and vanished, his task complete. Etched above the gate into Eldrin's fold, a phrase shimmered in threads of silver: destiny is sculpted not by decisions alone, but by the courage to live through them, and no soul is separate from the fabric they shape. Title: The Toll of Dreams. Year: 161,217,948.6. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The town of Meribon was known for two things: its 3 moons and its persistent lack of fairness. The wealthiest lived on floating platforms above the lake, where automated sky carts delivered breakfast and not a drop of rain ever touched their heads. Everyone else, clockmakers, poets, bakers, and dreamers, lived below in the fog. No one complained aloud, because whenever someone did, they were sent to the lake's edge to reflect. They rarely returned. The blind poet had never seen the moons, but she described them perfectly. She claimed she didn't need eyes to witness truth, only rhythm. She lived in a hollow stump and made ink from crushed berries and soot. Her verses were strange, humorous, haunting. People whispered her words as jokes until they started to come true, when her newest rhyme named names of those levitating above, and those left below. She was summoned to the edge. There she met him, the clockmaker beneath the lake. He smiled. She didn't. Every dream, she told him, demands its toll, some paid in silence, some in soul. Chapter 2. Beneath the lake was a hidden city made of gears and gurgled time. Every minute spent in silence above had turned into an hour of toil below. The clockmaker explained. Each floating platform was powered by a dream denied, a joke unsaid, a poem burned before breath. He offered the poet a trade: stay and help him recalibrate the city's dream engine, make it fair, make it absurd, make it beautiful. She agreed, but only if he agreed to one rule: no more hidden tolls. If dreams are taxed, tax must be named. So together they were built. Children above started waking up laughing instead of crying. The rich dreamed of being poor and woke with empathy. Elevators stalled until jokes were shared. Sky carts floated crooked unless a story was told on board. The blind poet wrote a new verse: let the stars swing low and the soil rise high. Let laughter weigh more than gold can buy. And Meribon changed. Chapter 3. The platforms didn't fall. They landed softly, evenly. Bridges were built, but not for escape, for exchange. The clockmaker remained beneath the lake, now a storyteller in his own right. He crafted pocket watches that chime only when the lie is believed. The blind poet walked openly now, wearing a crown of gears and ink-stained gloves. At each dawn, she performed her taxes paid in poems, paid in truth. And every moonlit evening, she asked one question of the crowd: what toll did your dream take? Some answered in tears, others in giggles, but all answered, carved in moonlight script along the lake's edge. Her oldest verse remains: every dream demands its toll, some paid in silence, some in soul, but when the toll is named, even the blind can see justice bloom. Title: The Harmony Between. Year: 160,897,435.5. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the lakeside commune of Iserla Hollow, conflict resolution wasn't just a practice, it was a ritual. Every disagreement, from the smallest fence line squabble to grief-drenched heartbreaks, was brought to the circle of shadows, a quiet amphitheater carved into moonlit rock. There, under stars, the community sat. They didn't judge. They listened. The voice of the moon's shadow had no formal power. She merely echoed what was said, reshaped it, softened the edges, and allowed people to hear themselves. Across from her sat the keeper of the forgotten threshold, a reclusive elder who tended the stones of the circle and reminded all that peace wasn't absence of conflict, but the courage to walk through it. When an argument over land nearly split the community, two families, both claiming ancestral rights to the same plot, it seemed even the circle might fail. But the voice only said, to fully face yourself is to unlock your original blueprint. And so they did. Chapter 2. Each family shared their lineage, not to prove dominance, but to reveal pain. One had lost a child on that land. The other had planted the first seeds after a storm took their home. Tears came, not resolution, but recognition. The keeper walked the threshold, drawing symbols in the dust, reminders that truth isn't binary, and that resolution begins not with verdicts, but with shared space. Third family offered a solution. Shared stewardship. Unheard of, unwritten, but it felt right. So it began. Together they built a greenhouse. Harvests were distributed. Ceremonies of remembrance were held for the lost child, while new trees were planted for the living. Conflict wasn't erased. It was repurposed. Chapter 3. As Isola Hall grew, others came to learn from the circle. They didn't come for laws. They came for presence, for the act of being seen. The voice of the moon's shadow trained others to speak not louder, but deeper. The keeper opened the threshold for younger minds, inviting them to carry its legacy forward. And once a year, on the night of mirrored moons, the community walked the edge of the lake in silence, each carrying a stone. At dawn, they placed their stone in the circle, adding to its shape. It wasn't perfect, but it held them, all of them. Etched into the amphitheater's heart are words withered by time, yet sharp in memory. To fully face yourself is to unlock your original blueprint, and to face each other is to remember that peace is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to walk through it together. Title: The Price of Stardust. Year: 160,576,922.9. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the fractured city of Stellanox, where laughter was rationed and apology taxed, the Ministry of Guilt ran the world's most prestigious comedy school. It made sense. Pain made the best punchlines. Forgiveness, however, was outlawed. It mudded up the bureaucracy. Enter the Flame Walker, former unlicensed arsonist turned stand-up philosopher. She wore charred boots and carried a mic that doubled as a torch. Her performances left rooms lit and hearts scorched. She was invited back to Stellanox not to perform, but to stand trial. 10 years ago, she'd burned the ministry's flagship accidentally while trying to cook an omelet on a faulty stage light. Officially, they said she owed 47 apologies and 3.5 public humiliations. Unofficially, they missed her. Her public defender was the one who drinks Shadow, a comic exorcist who specialized in hecklers' inner demons. He hadn't smiled since the Great Cringe Riots. Together, they were expected to fail spectacularly. Instead, they rewrote the act. Chapter 2. In court, the Flame Walker requested her apologies be performed as a roast. One by one, she lit up each ministry official with wicked truths wrapped in puns. To the High Inquisitor: Your empathy so thin, even ghosts won't haunt you. To the tax collector: You drain joy faster than a sad vampire on espresso. The crowd laughed. The judges winced. Then came her closing line. No victory arrives clean. It is smuggled in on sweat, silence, and stardust. Gasps, then applause, then a pause. The one who drinks Shadow stepped up, holding a mirror not magical, just reflective. I forgive her, he said, voice trembling, and myself. Then he broke the mirror over his knee. Glass sparkled like stars. Something in the city cracked. Chapter 3. Forgiveness spread like an unsanctioned meme. People started forgiving unpaid parking tickets with interpretive dance. Lovers held hands in parks, telling awkward truths without flinching. The ministry tried to clamp down, created the Department of Regret licensing, but it was too late. Laughter turned gentle. Jokes grew softer. Wounds began to hum. Blaine Walker opened a new club. Stardust and Sweat. Entry cost 1 regret, but you had to share it on stage. The one who drinks Shadow ran sound and served bitter tea. At the club's entrance, chiseled into cracked stone, it reads: No victory arrives clean. It is smuggled in on sweat, silence, and stardust. And when we forgive, we find the punchline we were always too hurt to hear. Title: The Fire That Waited. Year: 160,256,409.8. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shadow of the broken citadel of Ironer, a community of former enemies lived in uneasy peace. The war had scorched their history and shattered their maps, but the surviving clans, Timberkind, the Frostmar, and the Riverborn had built a village from what remained. They called it Hearthbin. No flag flew above it. No anthem played. Only a fire was kept lit in the center square, tended not by soldiers or priests, but by volunteers who took shifts in silence. Among them was the Laughing Ash, a war poet who had lost her voice in the last siege. She spoke now only in gestures and charcoal sketches, each drawn on the broken stones of the old city. She was joined often by the Wanderer who watches, an aging scout who had betrayed every banner he'd worn, yet never lost his love for stars. He had made it his mission to ensure Hearthbin's night skies remained free of torchlight and drones untouched, unbroken. The pause was not weakness, The wanderer wrote in his journal, "It's a turning of the soul." And each night, as people gathered around the fire, silence reigned, not as fear, but as pact. Chapter 2. It began with a wheel. A child from the river-born broke one, and the ember-kinged blacksmith refused to repair it. Old bridges stirred. Cold shoulders returned. The frost-marked farmer spoke of splitting lands again. The fire flickered. So the laughing ash kicked up her charcoal. She drew a wheel, then a bridge, and hands passing stone. The next morning, 3 strangers found sketches tucked under their doors. They met at the fire. They spoke, not to debate, but to build. Together, they fashioned a new wheel not from old alloys, but woven reeds, heated by frost stone, sealed with ash glue, and worked. So did they. Word spread. Soon carpenters traded methods across clans. Healers combined lore. Children taught each other lullabies of 3 tongues. And every evening, they returned to the fire not to forget, but to forge. Harmony grew, not as law, as habit. Chapter 3. The final test came with a messenger from the high capital, an envoy bearing gifts, maps, and a suggestion. Choose the leader. Be governed. Unite under the old crown. The villagers hesitated. The laughing ash stepped forward, holding up a drawing. It showed the fire, and the stars above it, and hands in a circle. The wanderer spoke, just once. We already have a crown. It lights our nights. The envoy left confused, but the villagers understood. That night the fire burned brighter. No orders were given, but work began. A new irrigation system, a rotating harvest calendar, joint storytelling nights. No single idea ruled, only the shared pulse of a people rebuilding together. And on the cracked wall of the old citadel, now garden grown and vine draped, a message endures. The pause is not weakness. It's a turning of the soul, and the stars remember. What silence dare not speak? Title. The divide beneath our steps. Year 159,995,997. Era. Early Awakening. Author. Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. There were 2 cities in one. Love Salmora. Glass towers. Neural uplinks, programmed sunsets, a place where people walked past each other like algorithms, precise but detached. Below, north, the underside of the mirror, smoke-laced alleys, dream traders, whispers passed like currency, a place where people bled color into cracked stone just to feel real. The divide wasn't just physical, it was metaphysical, split and coded into culture, law, and memory. No one crossed without consequence, until the timeless child did. No one remembered when she arrived. She wore a coat stitched with discarded thoughts and a watch that ran backward. Her age shifted with every truth she spoke. Most days she looked 10, others ancient. She wandered between Salmora and North without guards stopping her. Because she didn't look like a threat, but she was. Because she listened, and listening was rebellion. Chapter 2. In Salmora, she whispered stories from North. In North, she asked Salmoran riddles and waited for laughter. People started to notice. A courier in Salmora paused to help a musician in North tune his rusted strings. A North-born doctor began healing upling, burned mines and secret clinics. It was small, but contagious. Each forward stride is a declaration of who you are becoming. The outcast flame emerged once a revered Salmora judge, now exiled for claiming justice, must serve the unseen. He joined the child, not as protector, but as witness. They began chalking spiral sigils on mirrored walls, gateways not through magic, but attention, because to look clearly at another was the first cut in the wall. Chapter 3. The systems pushed back. Uplink feeds showed fear. Monitoring reports. Dream dealers were arrested. So were poets. But the spirals remained, drawn in bathrooms, etched on cups. The tube behind years. The timeless child was caught, or so they thought. But the one they captured was just a reflection she had outgrown. The real her walked through the minds of both cities now. And the outcast flame. He lit a bonfire between the walls. Not to burn, but warm. One day, a meeting was held. No announcement, just a spiral drawn on the ground in chalk at the border between cities. And people came from both sides. They didn't chant. They didn't fight. They told stories, listened, paused, and walked away with soot on their shoes and stardust in their eyes. Carved at the meeting place, in the place where mirrors once stood, a message now reads, each forward stride is a declaration of who you are becoming, and some steps crack divides just by being taken. Title: The Grateful Bloom. Year: 159,615,384.2. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan. And Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the wild groves of Highland Root, where trees whispered ancestral memories and moss bloomed in ruins, lived the Thorn Warden, a silent guardian wrapped in living bramble and twilight prayers. She tended to the forest that remembered every kindness and every cruelty. The villagers of nearby Bessel feared her. They believed her garden could curse the ungrateful and bless the humble, though none dared test which was true. For generations, the warden accepted no offerings, asked no favors. She merely watched. Then came the one beneath all names, an orphan scribe with 1,000 unfinished stories and one aching question. What happens when gratitude is not owed but chosen? He carried nothing but a tattered journal and vowed to thank the world, even for its thorns. On the day he entered Tylenroot, he bowed to the wind, wept into the soil, and carved a poem into bark not to mark territory, but to honor the shade. The forest stirred, and the thorn warden watched. The future begins not tomorrow, but the moment he released yesterday's grip. Chapter 2. The warden gave no words, but the vines shifted, a path opened. The one beneath all names followed it, leaving whispers of gratitude behind. A song to the creek, a blessing to the bee, a dance for the ash tree's fallen leaves. Where he stepped, the forest glowed faintly, and when he stumbled into a clearing tangled with sorrowweed, a plant fed by bitterness, the warden arrived. She raised her arm. A thorn pierced his hand. He bowed and said thank you. The sorrowweed withered. The warden blinked. That night she spoke for the first time in decades. You are the first to return thanks to pain. Together they began to untangle the oldest roots of the forest. Each knot unwound with a name once forgotten. Each blossom opened with a memory reclaimed. Gratitude, they learned, was not about what had been given, but about what could be grown. Chapter 3. Trouble came not with fire, but with harvesters from the south. They came with cleavers, charms, and promises. They would tame the wildwood in exchange for its blessings. They saw the forest as a vault to be opened, not a story to be listened to. The villagers of Vessel hesitated, until the one beneath all names stood in the square and spoke a truth that felt like a breeze through old wounds. She who kept us safe never asked for thanks. That does not mean she did not deserve it. He opened his journal and read every gratitude he'd etched, then handed the book to the youngest harvester. She read one line and cried. That night the harvesters left, not by force, by feeling, and Vessel gathered at the forest's edge. Each person laid a token small, honest, personal, at the roots of the grove. The warden wept, not for sorrow, for bloom. The forest opened, not to swallow them, to welcome them, and where the one beneath all names once knelt, a statue now grows in living bark, engraved only with the future begins not tomorrow, but the moment you release yesterday's grip and say thank you, even to the thorn. Title: Threads for Tomorrow. Here. 159,194,171.5. Era: Early Awakening. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Bessel was stitched together from stories. Literally, tapestries lined the streets, each thread a memory, a promise, a warning. Elders wove history into clothes. Children learned to read not from books, but from cloaks that changed with time. But memory was heavy, and some threads chafed. When the Council of Looms declared that only sanctioned tales could be stitched going forward, the youngest weavers rebelled. They formed the Unspooled, a secret group that embroidered forbidden truths beneath hems and cuffs. Among them was the Soul Weaver, a quiet teen with thread, flicked fingers and eyes like storm twilight. She didn't speak often, but every cloth she crafted sang louder than thunder. She found her match in the wanderer of closed roads, an old vagabond who walked dead-end paths that opened only for those who had nothing left to lose. He carried no tapestry, only holes where his stories used to be. Together they began weaving a legacy not of control, but of courage. Chapter 2. They taught children to thread hope into grief. They unraveled propaganda garments and wreaths, spun them into capes of resistance. Their most daring creation, the legacy cloak. It was stitched from scraps of 100 lives. Those who had spoken out, disappeared, survived, or simply dreamed in silence. To wear it was to remember. To carry it was to promise. The council caught wind and branded them framemakers, declared their work dangerous. But legacy doesn't ask permission. They left the cloak on the shoulders of a child named Luma, who'd never spoken a word, but whose eyes carried centuries. When she walked through the central square, the tapestries fluttered. Unwritten memories emerged. History reshaped itself, not with fanfare, but with a whisper. Chapter 3. Bessel never outlawed weaving again. They restructured the council to include not just elders, but children, wanderers, and truth-tellers. The Soul Weaver passed quietly, her last thread woven into the hem of Luma's new cloak. The wanderer of closed roads disappeared one morning. No trail, only a soft breeze where walls had stood. Now each child in Bessel weaves one passion before they speak their first word. Some stitch dreams, others warnings, all legacy. At the Looms Gate, a public hall open to all weavers inscribed a single thread of truth in gold. And troll is the illusion we wear when we forget how to trust. But trust is a needle. And legacy, the club we leave behind. Title, The Rhythm of the Ridiculous. Year, 158,974,358.6. Era, Early Awakening. Author, Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Republic of Clatterfold had one rule. Always act as though you are being watched because you are, not by an all-seeing government, nor a divine tribunal, but by each other. Everyone performed. Wakes were held with laugh tracks. Elections required interpretive dance, and the Prime Minister once debated himself in a two-person puppet skit. Into this pageant wandered the star-bound pilgrim, a traveler with a suitcase full of books no one read anymore, and a face that refused to perform. He spoke plainly, walked with purpose, refused to narrate his inner thoughts aloud. Naturally, he was arrested. His crime, emotional withholding in a narrative first zone. His judge, the name unspoken, a masked satirist who spoke only through puppets and wore 12 hats, depending on mood. But instead of sentencing, the name posed a question. Why do you not dance when the song is everywhere? The pilgrim replied, because even chaos has a rhythm for those who stop trying to lead the dance. Hush fell, and Clatterfold began to bleach. Chapter 2. The pilgrim was placed under theatrical observation. He was followed by a troupe of exaggerated actors who tried to mirror his every move, but his quiet sincerity made their mimicry feel hollow. He helped an old woman carry water, no applause cue. He read to a blind goat, not because it was poetic, but because the goat liked the sound. He fixed a broken fountain using silence and patience, which prompted the onlookers to spontaneously deliver a monologue on patience, until someone asked, "What if we stopped talking?" And that broke the down. People began pausing in the middle of scenes. They forgot their assigned course. One man stopped juggling and admitted he didn't enjoy it. Baker sang off key because it felt better than miming perfect harmony. The name unspoken summoned the pilgrim again. "You are unmaking the Republic." "No," the pilgrim said. "You built a stage, and just walked across it without pretending it was a cliff." Chapter 3. The next day, the government collapsed into a picnic. No orders, just blankets. Laughter not scripted, but stumbled into. The star-bound pilgrim read aloud, not to entertain, but to share. People listened. The name unspoken removed one of their hats, then another, then all 12, and beneath it all, a face, tired, free. "I forgot who I was," they whispered, under all the jokes. "You're still funny," the pilgrim said, "but now it's real." By week's end, Clatterfold had no capital, no leaders, and more stories than ever. Each citizen chose a new name. Some kept old ones. No one corrected anyone else. At the edge of the village, a statue now juggles invisible balls and wears no mask. Beneath it, etched in plain stone, even chaos has a rhythm for those who stop trying to lead the dance. And if you must perform, let it be true. Title, Maps of Becoming. Year, 158,653,945.8. Era, Early Awakening. Author, Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the divided town of Kalfar, two maps govern the lives of all. One was etched in stone, rigid, unyielding. It marked where the privileged could live, what they could learn, and how far their voices could reach. The other was drawn in chalk, soft, mutable, constantly erased and redrawn by those not permitted to leave their corners. But even chalk leaves traces. The astral cartographer was born without a map, a child of both sides, belonging nowhere. She wandered between zones, sketching invisible stars in the dirt, crafting routes where none dared to walk. When people asked her who she was, she smiled and said, "Becoming." The laughing Eshwash from the shadows, once a respected planner of the stone map, now exiled for drawing a circle where there should have been a wall. He laughed not from joy, but from clarity. Together they sought to redraw the maps, this time with the heartbeat of the people. Chapter 2. They began in the alleys, tracing forgotten names in soot. Then came the gardens, plots shared across boundaries, nurtured by forbidden hands. The council tried to stop them, declared the new maps heresy, claimed community could not thrive without borders, that safety required separation, but fruit doesn't ask permission to grow across fences. The cartographer mapped not just streets, but emotions. She charted where kindness bloomed, where forgiveness flowed, where trauma rooted, and she invited others to contribute. One by one, neighbors began to walk routes once feared, shared bread, shared sorrow, then laughter, nervous at first, then bold. The laughing Ash offered lessons on architecture and regret. He taught that buildings were only sacred if people felt welcome in them. And slowly, the town began to shift. Chapter 3. The stone map was never erased, but beside it now stood a living map, a mural of stitched cloth, layered memories, and chalk stardust. Children updated it daily, not by decree, but by choice. And those who had held the most power, they began to visit the other side, not to inspect, but to learn. The astral cartographer vanished one morning, her last map etched into the bark of the town's oldest tree. At the root, her words remained. Becoming begins the moment you let go of who you no longer are. And every time someone took a step toward another, the map grew, and the town remembered how to breathe together.